Hey everyone, thank you for being here today. I am Teresa Fapua. I am the Vice Chair for Planning Commission. We'd like to welcome everybody today. We're going to start with, go right ahead with our meeting. Um, we're hoping that our chair will be here soon, but since I am the Vice Chair, I will go ahead and start this. Time is very crucial, so we're going to go ahead and start. Okay, I'd like to open the meeting at, oh, okay, let's stand for a pledge of the flag. Where's the flag? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to do the roll call.
Satori,
Present.
Fapua,
Present?
Nuris,
Here.
Paniza,
Here.
and Katur is absent for now.
Okay. I'd like to approval of the minutes for May 7, 2024 PC meeting minutes and of June 4th, 2024 PC meeting minutes.
Motion for approval, please.
Second.
Motion carries. Okay.
One at a time?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay. I'd like to give this to Mr. Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Planning Commission. This item is the consideration of the city's housing element. There's a general plan amendment and zone change involved, and the project numbers are up on the screen. So we're going to, this is a somewhat lengthy presentation, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. We're going to at first give an introduction to what the housing element is and some of the key things that are contained within it. Each of you should have a binder that has the actual, what we call the revised draft housing element. As indicated in the city staff report, this document has been reviewed by the state of California. There's been some back and forth between the city staff and the state HCD staff. That's Department of Housing and Community Development, to make sure that the document is essentially adoptable by our city council. So that's taken quite some time to even get it here. And there's a lot of work by both the consultant that helped us put it together, the city staff, as well as staff at the in Sacramento that worked on reviewing the document. So there's been also a considerable amount of public input that's occurred over the last few years. The city's held a workshop, given presentations to the city council. So this is something that's, although new to the Planning Commission itself, not necessarily new to the public, other than for tonight's meeting, there was notification sent to any property owner within 300 feet of any site that was being rezoned. So we may have some comments on some of the rezonings, and that's part of the implementation aspect of this. So I wanted to just kind of give an overview of that. But so I'll get into the presentation now. The housing element is one of the city's 7 mandated elements. It's actually the only element that has significant implications to all other general plan elements, including the land use element. So one of the things, for example, that we're doing is changing some of the one land use designation and some of the general plan language to allow greater densities, but it interacts with the city's land use element as well. The elements are basically chapters of the city's general plan, and there's at least 7 of them as mandated by state law. It's the only element that's subject to state oversight. So a state agency called HCD, Housing and Community Development, reviews the city's housing element before we even think of bringing it to you for consideration for adoption. There are a lot of state laws that pertain to housing elements, and the staff at HCD makes sure that our element conforms to all of California's laws with regard to providing housing construction and zoning opportunities. The housing element, it used to be updated every 5 years, and that changed in this round to every 8 years. But the review is a little bit more stringent, and the state's really begun to take a very close look at what cities are doing with zoning and land use, and requiring that for example, any of the sites that we rezone have to allow the housing development by right, which basically removes any environmental review, because CEQA only pertains to discretionary projects where the city council or the planning commission has a discretionary action to take. So that doesn't exist, CEQA doesn't apply. So it's actually a really big thing.
Give me 1 second, Michael, I'm sorry. I failed to announce that for public participation, there are 3 ways to submit public comments. First, email your comment directly to the Planning Division. Second, submit when comments via the city's website. And third, attend the meeting in person. To email your comment, simply email a comment to the planner identified in the public hearing notice, or send the email to, I don't want to read out loud, there's a long email there. Public comments may also be emailed to and by including Planning Commission public comments in the subject. To submit a comment via the city's website, please visit www.dalycity.org agendas. To complete the public comments form, in the comment field box, include the item number and or title of the item as well as your comments. 3, to speak at the meeting in person, please complete a speaker card located at the entrance to the council chambers and submit it to the staff member and as early in the meeting as possible. All written comments received by 4 p.m. on the meeting day will be provided to the Planning Commission prior to the meeting. Comments are not read aloud into the record. Any written comments received after 4 p.m. on the meeting date are not guaranteed to be received by the Planning Commission prior to the meeting. Person with disabilities who required auxiliary aids or services in attending or participating in this meeting should call the office or Michael Van Lonkussen at 991-8158 as soon as possible. Thank you so much. I apologize. I failed to state that part for our participants.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for that. So the housing element is organized itself into several chapters, and tonight we're going to focus on a couple of those. And one of the probably the most important, or the one we spend the most time on, is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. We're also going to talk about the AFFH and some of the policies related to the housing element. And AFFH stands for Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, if I think I got that right. So here are some of the laws that were passed since the last housing element was adopted in 2015. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but the purpose of these slides is to show that there's a number of laws that we have to comply with, including streamlining, removing roadblocks to development. The state of California is right now is geared to removing impediments to housing construction. And one of those things is, as you'll see, is removing future discretionary review on the part of the city. There's a thought that that can sometimes hinder development, and it's a very deliberate effort to try and remove that, as well as also minimize, if you will, the amount of hurdles that people who want to build housing, developers who want to build housing, have in the interest of providing more housing to Californians. This is the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. Housing elements must assess fair housing issues in the community, analyze areas of opportunity and access to resources, identify housing sites that foster an inclusive community and provide equitable access to resources, identify strategies to address barriers to fair housing, and include a program to implement those strategies. And we'll go over what our program is. So the RHNA process identifies the total number of housing units separated into 4 affordability levels that every local government in the Bay Area must accommodate for the period between 2023 and 2031. Primary role of the RHNA methodology is to encourage a pattern of housing growth for the Bay Area that meets the needs of all residents. And that's according to ABAG. That's the official statement of what the RHNA is. And these are the income categories. They're basically broken down by different percentages between extremely low income all the way up to above moderate income. And we can slow down and answer any questions that you have. But essentially, these are the income limits for 4-person households in San Mateo County, beginning with extremely low income at $58,000 all the way up to above moderate income. Those would be households who own, of a family of 4 that earn over $223,900. And then there's obviously some things in the middle. So when we talk about the RHNA, there are income groups, categories that the housing must be provided for. And there's assumptions made that certain densities produce affordability. It's also assumed that ADUs produce affordability. So we're able to, our consultant really takes all of the units that we could possibly produce and kind of massages those numbers and makes a list, and we're going to go over that, of the existing sites in the pipeline that are ready for development, even projects that are under construction after a certain date, as well as potential future projects. And if those things together don't equate to the number of units that we need to construct, then we have to rezone land. And that's exactly what the city staff will be recommending the Planning Commission forward to the City Council to do, because we don't currently have enough zoned land to meet our RHNA. So,
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
Because that's critical, the fact that the law says we have to have a certain number of units that we will be able to have over a period of time. And we do this compliance work basically to show that we are complying with them. And so what would be some of the things that would happen? I understand state funding could be cut off from the city. What other things could happen if we don't actually comply and come up with a plan to show that we'll be able to meet the housing as required?
Yeah, ironically, there are some things that are ironic. One of the things that we could lose is a funding for affordable housing projects, and that's kind of like one of the ironic things. But there are also other things that we can lose funding for, even like infrastructural improvements. So one of the ways that the state has hooks in us, if you will, is to make sure that we have a compliant housing element. We apply for funding from the state. And so that's essentially the answer to your question. It's a big deal. Yeah, it means millions of dollars to the city. Yes. You're welcome. So this slide shows what's the process of the RHNA, and I'll try and speed this up because it's a pretty long presentation. But basically, the state HCD requires the different regions in the Bay Area, that's ABAG, develop a number of units through demographic studies that need to be constructed. And in this region, for this round, ABAG determined that about 441,000 dwelling units needed to be constructed. And it allocated that to Daly, portion of that to Daly City with 4,838 units. In Southern California, it's a different thing called something different, but here it's ABAG that allocates to Daly City.
And why is that, Michael? Is it because of where we're located at, or?
It's got to partially do with the size of the city and our location. Yeah, and some cities have a larger RHNA in the Bay Area, and some have a smaller one. It's kind of population dependent, sort of. Yeah. They try and do a jobs housing balance too. It's a very complicated formula, and it outspits these numbers, and yeah.
Your Honor, are we tonight making a specific plan to amend the general plan?
Yes, and the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to the City Council to amend the general plan, but more important, and including replacement of the existing housing element that was adopted in 2015 with this housing element. So that's the way the general plan would be amended, and some other ways we'll go over, as well as some rezonings.
Your Honor, I have observed lately that we're doing a lot of specific plan amendment to the general plan. When was the last time we have a general plan amendment? I haven't heard anything yet. It should be at least every 10 years. It's mandatory under the law that we have to have some sort of general plan amendment. What is the needs of this time?
The general plan was last amended in 2013. The whole general plan was updated, I mean. The general plan's,
11 years. That's too long.
it's
When
getting there.
we have to plan this because we cannot just be doing this every now and then for a specific plan. Depending on what our needs, depending on what we want to happen. So I urge and implore the planning department really to see to it that how many acres are available in the city yet.
Not many. We're going to go over that, actually.
I was just asking that to one of the council members, that the state is mandating cities to, they come in and build, it's mandated. But then how much land does the city have to do this?
Not a lot.
How much do we have to give in to that? And going back to what you're saying, Mr. Satori, is there any legalities or policies that general plan amendment has to be in a certain amount of time to revisit?
You're
Every years, every 10 years?
There's no legislated number of years that the city has to update its general plan. But generally speaking, what actually happens is that the EIR associated with the general plan can kind of get stale. And so cities tend to, around 15, 20 years, cities start to look at updating the.
But you say that 8 years, every 8 years.
This is housing element, though.
Okay.
Yeah, that's mandated by law.
Right.
The housing element must be updated. The city can only amend the general plan 4 times a year. So that may be something that you may have heard. So there's a limit on the number of times per year we can change the general plan.
Because I remember, because I have been here for almost 20 years, the last time we have this during the time of Pat Martel, the general plan amendment, wherein there was a summit. A lot of people coming from all walks of life really participated. I think we have to see this again, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. So this slide shows the income allocation of our 4,838 unit RENA among the income groups that I described previously. So we have to make sure that not only is there capability to build 4,800 units, but they have to be allocated by these incomes. And again, there are assumptions made about density that kind of go into the formulas that the states agreed that the city's proposal works. So one of the first things that we have to do is, one of the first things of preparing a housing element is to take a look at the housing sites that we have. And there are certain sites that make the list. And there are sites that are in the process of being made available for residential uses via rezoning, sites that are vacant and zoned for residential uses, and sites that are not vacant, but that can be redeveloped to allow for a higher density or more intensive residential development. And projects that have been approved, issued building permits, or have commenced construction prior to the RENA baseline date. It's hard to read this, but this is essentially our initial list of projects that are in the pipeline. So these are under construction, projects that have building permits that may be issued inside the planning period between 2023 and 2031, et cetera.
Point of interjection, Your Honor. How many acres of land are still available in Daly City for housing? And how many are still available for commercial use? And how many are still available for industrial use? Or we don't have it?
That answer might be in the general plan. I don't have that figure off the top of my head. The residential one we should be able to figure out, because if we add all the acres up in
Because,
here,
Your Honor, my question is leading because there are some complaints here that it might create a lot of havoc in their parking space and so forth. That's why if the general plan will be inculcated to them, or they will be informed of what to do. That's why I'm saying we cannot just be acting on or reacting only based on the needs. We have to see to it at least we have to have a long range or medium term of allocation of resources, of especially the acres of land availability. We cannot just say, oh, this is vacant, let's make it as affordable land, affordable uses of residential. No, we have to be, more or less, we have to have a plan that really can work within the city. I'm saying here, based on the general interest, public welfare, and general interest of all people here. We cannot just, oh, we want to build here because it's vacant. And to me, putting up more affordable housing, it makes the city less conducive for business. And that's what I'm, based on my experience. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
So basically, there's a list of sites that can meet our arena, and the consultant Placeworks has put together a map that shows the location of each one of those. And I won't get too far into that, but there are sites in the Bayshore that are on the upper right-hand side of the screen. We got to count the teacher, the JESD.
That's part of it.
Yeah, that's in the middle on the top. 305 Eastmore is there. And then, yeah, some of the other sites are just scattered around the balance of Daly City. Yeah, we get to count some of the stuff that's under construction. 45 Midway Drive, Midway Village is getting counted. 550 units there.
Would you consider that's the hugest, that's the biggest one that we have?
That's the biggest. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest project. Yeah, it's the biggest housing project under construction in the county. I have been told. This project was approved and has yet to be built, but we get to count it. So these slides just show some of the projects that have been approved. This is under construction in the Bayshore, 323 units. Or I'm sorry, this is actually 133 units. That's a typo. Point Martin. 99 Southgate, the Planning Commission and City Council just approved this. This is where Burlington Coat Factory is. So we get to count that as in the pipeline. 2321 Geneva Avenue, which went through the Planning Commission and City Council and kind of stalled, now is subject to the city's CMU zoning district. That gets to be counted. 10 Park Plaza Drive, which is a Kimco proposal that was approved a few years ago, is also counted. This is essentially where the medical offices exist in between, what is it, Sleep Train and John Daly Boulevard. Yeah, we would replace that building. And then 699 Saramani, which came before Planning Commission and City Council just in the last year. This was a huge portion of meeting our arena, 1,150 units, and that's been approved. So of course we get to count that. 493 Eastmore at the corner of Eastmore and Sullivan, northwest corner. We get to count that at 72 units, all affordable housing. We talked about 305 Eastmore. We got to count that. That was just recently completed, but we still get to count it in our arena. So when all of the projects that are in the pipeline are added up, and again, there's calculations made for each one of the income levels, that's compared to the number of units in our arena, and we come up with a 1,216 unit shortfall. And that's shown, just for ease of reference, if you're interested in looking at it in the housing element, it's at table HE54A, page 168. This is basically a screenshot of that table.
Michael, can you repeat that? So regardless of everything that we have already and will be, we're still short?
Yes, yes. Yeah, 4,800 units is a lot of units, yeah. Even after the approval of
This one.
JUHSD,
It doesn't light up.
we're still short.
Look.
So when we're short, and most cities are short, we're not unique in that way. Some cities aren't, but most are, and we're one of them. The state says you need to have an adequate sites program, and there are criteria for what that has to include. Sites must be appropriately zoned early enough in the planning period to provide realistic and viable development opportunity. Where land inventory does not demonstrate the supply of suitable, available, and appropriately zoned sites to accommodate the RENA, the housing element must include a program to provide the sites. And that's another way of saying that you need to rezone property. Adequate sites program must accommodate 100% of the shortfall. That was on the previous slide. And the zoning ordinance must allow the residential uses on those sites by right. No city discretion, no rezonings in the future, no use permits, no public hearings, no coming back to the planning commission and city staff. It has to be by right. And specifically not requiring any approval that would constitute a project pursuant to CEQA. And that's another major thing, because CEQA only applies to discretionary projects. And when something's non-discretionary, there's no CEQA review. So this is actually a very important thing. One of the things that isn't mentioned here is that there has to be developer interest in the sites. We can't go and find properties where even if they're vacant, if the developer says if they have expressed no interest, especially if they've actually got existing buildings where there's been no developer interest. So the state will take a look at that and say, yeah, how do we know that's actually going to be redeveloped? So, and one of the things we have, for example, and we included as an attachment in your staff report for the Seton parcels in particular, is that AHMC, who owns those properties, has expressed some interest in redeveloping those. And yeah, so, and that's an oversimplification. But there is an interest in having a wellness village in that area, and we attached the letter for you. So when we talk about rezonings, at this point, and this is a couple of years ago, the city staff took a look around and said, well, how much vacant land do we really have left to rezone? And there really isn't a whole lot. One of the parcels that, and we'll get into each one of these, and maybe we should just do this, but this table is HE 52 on page 161. It shows the rezoning sites. How many?
Is that page 3 of your report?
It's as a matter of fact, that is summarized on page 3. Yes, this provides more information, but yes, there's a good summary. Thank you, Commissioner Harris. This table on page 3. And maybe we should just get into it in terms of which sites these are, because this is just really hard to read. But the unit count has to be a realistic rezone capacity. So the city consultant and HCD do a back and forth negotiation about what is realistic. Even though the zoning and the general plan might allow a certain number, that number gets reduced by a certain percentage because it isn't deemed to be realistic. And so that's why we kind of put that word there.
Your Honor, how do you determine shortfall? Shortfall of units. How do you determine it in the city?
The shortfall?
Yeah.
It's basically based on this table where we have the RENA on the left side, and then the underutilized, the vacant site capacity, and moving from left to right. We have the RENA, then we have the proposed and approved projects, the vacant site capacity, underutilized capacity, and then we get credit for an enormous amount of ADUs that are built, and Daly City is unique in that way. We add that all together, and then we subtract it from the 4838, and that's where we get the shortfall, and that's the 1,216 unit shortfall. So we get to include quite a few number of different categories, including what, a lot of ADUs, and we're still short 1,216 units. And that's explained in this.
Is it because of the expansion of population or because of migration?
Well, the 4838 is based. It's the RENA beginning with ABAG at the region. Population growth, both natural and immigration, is included in that. There's a
Because
huge
just like Daly City,
demographic.
our population is 107,353.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it goes down.
It does go down, right? Yeah.
So how could it be a shortfall of units?
But the long-term projection is that it goes up. So, yes, there's
Projected.
immigration, people have children, there's natural childbirth, there's all these demographics that are put into these numbers that basically.
Because I remember, Your Honor, about 7 years ago, there was a shortfall of, I think,